He also completed a postgraduate diploma in psychology research methods and her PhD in psychology with the honors. Professor Lynn Monrouxe contributes to the field are truly remarkable, and she is the deputy editor of medical education and specialty chief editor of Frontiers in Medicine, Healthcare Professionals, Education Research. Her research spans professionalism, professional identity, workplace dignity, emotional resilience, and innovative methodologies such as Q methodology, narrative research, and participatory consensus building approaches. Her impact is reflected over 9,000 citations with an H index of 51 and recognition as one of the top 5 authors globally in medical professionalism research. She has been ranked among leading research in science and engineering education. Beyond her publications, she has created the major capacity building initiatives, including establishing the Shanghai Medical Education Research Center in Taiwan, and being a founding member of the University of Sydney's Healthcare Professionals Education Research Network. We are privileged to learn from you today as she guides us through the complexity of literature reviews as essential foundations for rigorous academic inquiry. Please join me in warmly welcoming Professor Lynn Monrouxe for this guest speech. Over to you, Austin.
Thank you. First of all, everyone, I'm just checking that everyone can hear me okay. I'm going to have a look online. If anyone can't hear me online, just let me know, because we'll have to do something about that. But hello, everybody online, and hello, everybody in person. So before we start, I'm going to ask a quick question. Just give me a show of hands. How many of you here have used literature review methodologies like a scoping review or a systematic review? You know, how many of you have actually used them already? So just give me a show of hands. So if you have, yes, okay. Do you want to just shout out the type of review that you did? Systematic review? And which one?
Yeah.
Okay. And over there, I saw some hands going up. What type of review was it? Not sure? Over here? I'm sure there were some hands going up over here. A scoping review and a systematic review. Well, that's great, because you can join in, because there's a hell of a lot more reviews that we can be looking at, but also it's really useful that you've got these in the background that you know to build on. Because I think often the range of review types can cause us confusion. There's a bewildering array of review types, and it's very difficult to know which one to use and why. So when you were deciding on, for example, do I do a scoping review or a systematic review, that you had a rationale behind it. And so we're going to look at some of those rationales. So by the end of this workshop, I hope you have a clear understanding of the different types of reviews that you can do. So you don't just fall into saying, I'm just going to do a systematic review, because not one size fits all. It's not necessary that, you know, even though a systematic review sounds systematic, it's not necessarily the best review for you to do. So the objections in today's session is so that you can articulate the purposes and the appropriate use of at least 6 different review types, that you can apply decision frameworks to select the most appropriate review, because I said it's not necessarily that one review will fit all purposes. You can identify the reporting guidelines. Did you use reporting guidelines when you did yours? Like a Prisma? Yeah. really important to use reporting guidelines. And you can access the key resources. And halfway through our session today, there's a handout for you, which has got lots of things like that on. And I'm going to begin by reviewing the landscape. And then I'm going to report on the reviewing guidelines. And then we're going to have a hands-on activity. Everyone loves a hands-on activity, don't you? You all love talking to each other and doing something in a group. And then we're going to talk about the resources that you will have. So this quote by Maggio and Sewell captures why literature reviews are so foundational. They're not just a requirement, they're how we build on existing knowledge and identify gaps. So we ensure that our work contributes meaningfully. So reviews allow us to synthesize a whole range of findings from multiple studies to identify where the gaps really exist, where the contradictions are in the evidence, and, and give us an evidence from which to make an evidence-based decision on what research we might do, how we might advance the field. There is a problem. Many researchers default to calling everything a systematic review, regardless of the actual type of review that they're doing. But this isn't just an issue about labeling, what we call it. It creates a real mismatch between the questions being asked and the methods being used. And, this can cause problems when you're trying to get published. So trying to get published, if you haven't really articulated the strong rationale for what type of review you are doing and why, as already has been said, I've acted as Deputy Editor of Medical Education for about 20 years. I've been Chief Specialty Educator in Frontiers in Medicine for Medical Education for about 5 years, and we started that section. If we get a review coming in, we want to know that the authors really truly understand what kind of review they've done and why, and they've done it appropriately and it all matches. Otherwise, the paper will be rejected. And in reality, we have at least 14 different types of reviews. That's even confusing for people who understand the landscape. And each one is designed for a different purpose. And I'm not going to talk about all 14, so don't worry, we won't get too confused. But a mapping exercise is not a systematic review. An exploration of why something works is not a systematic review. So using the wrong label just undermines your research. So it's all about research rigor. Okay, so doing a systematic review is the first, or doing a review is the first step towards rigor. Doing the right review is the next step. So let's dive into the landscape. And I'm hopefully going to do this in less than 15 minutes and we won't get too bored. But I think it's really, really important we get the foundations right here. And also that my computer works when I press it. So let's first define what we mean by knowledge synthesis. The Canadian Institute of Health Research defines it as the contextualization and integration of research findings within a larger body of knowledge. And critically, it must be reproducible and transparent. That's the same with any research, right? And systematic or knowledge synthesis approaches are research. Okay, they're not just literature reviews because you are creating new knowledge when you do your review. Different reviews serve different purposes. Some answer focused research questions, does this intervention work, for example? Others map the literature, so what's out there on the topic. And others still try to understand the complexity of the topic. Why does this work? Why does it work in some contexts? Why does it not work in other contexts? Things like that. So different reviews serve different purposes. Some answer focused questions and others are more broad. The epistemological dimension matters too. Now, what I mean by epistemology is the nature of knowledge. Now, sometimes we think of knowledge as being true and not true, black and white, and that's a positivist perspective. And positivists' approaches suit effectiveness questions. So if you have a question about, does this work? Is this right? Is this a good way of doing things? That's a yes or a no, black and white type of answer. So you want to think about effectiveness. Interpretivist approaches suit meaning making. So if you want to understand about people's experiences, that can be very varied and there's no black and white answer, then interpretivist approaches are better for that. And realist approaches, and I'm going to touch on realist approaches, suit understanding mechanisms. So they suit the why questions. Why does this work? They suit people who are like 4-year-olds going around asking why all the time. Why does this work in that context? Why does it not work in that context? And those realist approaches are really good for those questions. Okay, so this is an at-a-glance summary. I'm going to give you a summary in the handout, so you don't have to necessarily write anything down. You will get this in your handout. And this table summarizes the major review types that you need to know. So I'm just going to highlight a few of the key differences. Systematic reviews answer focused, effective questions. They require quality assessments, so that's looking at the quality of the research that you're unpacking. They can take 12 to 18 months to do. Meta-analyses is a subset of this systematic review, and they statistically pool the results, and they do this in a very thorough way. They take all the data from the papers and run a meta-analysis. And I've done a few years ago, I did a meta-analysis with my colleagues in Taiwan. We looked at problem-based learning, and we did a meta-analysis looking at different factors in problem-based learning to look at the evidence. Scoping reviews, they map the literature and they identify gaps in the literature. That's the purpose. They are broader, and you don't typically have to look at the quality of the study. Okay, so you don't need a quality assessment. And they can take slightly shorter times, maybe 6 to 12 months. Then we have rapid reviews. So scoping reviews, I've done a number of scoping reviews. I'm a big fan of scoping reviews. If you want to know, if you're new to an area and you want to know what research to do in that area, a scoping review is your friend, okay? Because it gives you the gaps. And then you can go, okay, well, look, there's nothing on this, so we're going to do a review on it. Rapid reviews are different. So each of them have their different purposes. Rapid reviews sacrifice some of the rigor, and they sacrifice it for speed. Hence the term rapid. Under 3 months, if you can, and they inform urgent decisions. I've undertaken rapid reviews for policy makers who want to know basically what they should be doing in a particular area, but they always want to know it fast. So you have to sacrifice some of the rigor. They don't really care necessarily about rigor. They just want to know, what's the best evidence? What can you give me? Now, realist reviews are something else. Realist reviews ask why things work. So I talked to you about the 4-year-old going around saying why, focusing on context, mechanisms, and outcome configurations. So they take longer because you need deeper understandings. So the context, they'll say, what works, for whom, in which context. So if you want something a bit more deep and you're looking at mechanisms of, because you want to be developing an intervention or something, why things work, that's a mechanism, then you might want a realist review. Umbrella reviews synthesize existing systematic reviews on the same topic. So sometimes you think, I want to do a systematic review on this topic because I want to know what's out there. And then you go out there and you find, well, there's been 10 systematic reviews that have been done. So you might decide then, I'm going to do an umbrella review. I'm going to take all those systematic reviews and see what comes out of that. I have never done an umbrella review. It sounds quite complicated, but I think it sounds also very exciting. And then you have narrative reviews. That's the quality, the narrative reviews, sorry. They provide expert overview and, interpretation. They're flexible, but they are subject to selection bias. So you take a look and you say, what's the state of the knowledge? And equally, qualitative reviews, they synthesize qualitative research. That's hard as well, because qualitative research comes from different traditions. So some are much more black and white, some are more narrative, some are more interpretive. And so they kind of have to incorporate all of those different findings, but they focus on people's experiences, and necessarily because they're complex, they can take about 12 to 18 months. That's just a whistle-stop tour on some of the types of reviews, and within each of those broad brush categories, there are other reviews that can be seen. So let's take a look more closely at systematic reviews, since they're often considered to be the gold standard. So the key is the narrow, focused question, typically in a PICO format. Has anyone heard of PICO? Give me a population, intervention, comparison, outcome. Yes, PICO. You need comprehensive and reproducible searches. You need explicit inclusion and exclusion criteria, and you need to critically appraise each one of the studies for its quality. In health professions education, we have variants like BEME, that's Best Evidence Medical Education reviews from AME, that's the Association of Medical Education in Europe. There's qualitative syntheses using meta-ethnography and a mixed methods approach. But the important thing is to note the timeline here. Typically a year and a half. Cochrane reviews take on average 2 years to complete. And if someone tells you they did a systematic review in 3 months, I would say be very skeptical. They may have done it with a massive team, but they are likely not to have done it. So scoping reviews, which have become much more popular in health professions education, and for good reason. They map the key concepts, the types of evidence, and the gaps. And the question format is PCC, population, concept, context, much broader than the PICO. They a critical qualitative analysis and assessment is typically not required for a systematic review. Some people do it, most people don't. What you're basically doing is you're describing the extent and nature of the evidence. You're not synthesizing the effectiveness. So we're currently doing a systematic review on health professions education across Sri Lanka. We're not quality appraising the evidence. We want just to know what's been done. Okay, so we're looking for the gaps, we're looking for the strengths, we're looking for where it's been done, we're looking for the topics. We're not looking for the quality. So we're scoping. It's just literally what it means. They are often useful as a precursor to systematic reviews because they can help you determine whether there's enough literature to warrant a systematic in the first place. The methodological frameworks have evolved over the years. Arsky and O'Malley's original 2005 framework, then Levac in 2010 did an enhancement, and then the JVI Peters 2020 is now currently the gold standard. But the Peters paper 2020 builds on the other papers. Okay, so it's been an evolution. Realist reviews. Now, these are not easy to conduct. They deserve special attention because they answer a fundamentally different question. What works for whom, in what circumstances, and why? Remember your 4-year-old. Realist reviews. Your 4-year-old would love a realist review. They're theory-driven. So you develop and you test program theories. The core unit of analysis is the CMO, the context, mechanism, outcome, configuration. So that's in what context? What's the mechanism that brings forth an outcome? The context refers to the conditions that trigger the mechanisms. That context doesn't necessarily mean what it typically means in our normal conversations. It doesn't mean like classroom context. It might mean in the context of being a woman, or in the context of being a patient, or in the context of getting high grades. So there are different contexts that you describe the mechanisms. The mechanisms are the underlying processes. Now, being a psychologist, as you already introduced me, I like to think about psychological things that are going on under the surface. That's the why. What's going on? Why are you doing this? And that's often hidden, okay? So it's often invisible, but it's the underlying motivational processes. And then the outcomes are the results of the interaction between the context and the mechanism. These studies are primarily found and used for their relevance and their theory testing. So that's when you have a CMO configuration, that's a theory. You look at your data and you think, in the context of being a woman, the mechanism of anxiety or imposter syndrome brings an outcome of burnout, perhaps. Okay, so that's something that you might see in papers. That's your hypothesis. and you continue to test that as you find more papers. Okay, does that make sense? So the studies are chosen for their usefulness to build the theory and to test the theory. They're not necessarily about being methodologically of a high quality. And the search process is not like your systematic review where you key in all the words into a search engine and everything stays the same and you don't move it. It's more iterate. So you do a first search, you develop your theory, and then you do further searches. You might search the literature from the reference list. You might go back to your search engines. You may go onto the internet. There's no systematic way, so it's not reproducible. Okay, like the systematic reviews, it's much more interpretive and messy. These types of kind of like non-linear processes are really good for the complex social interventions like interprofessional education, like feedback systems, like curriculum reforms. The outcomes might vary by the context. I've done a number of these with my colleagues in Taiwan. Trust me, they're tricky, but when you actually get to the end and you publish, and we have, you feel like you understand the world much better, and you feel like you've made a contribution. So it's much more theoretical. So those of you who like theory would certainly like doing this, but they do take a long time. I'm just going to briefly cover these other important review types. So rapid reviews are essentially systematic reviews with streamlined methods to produce timely evidence. The trade-offs include fewer databases, limited grey literature, you don't have time to look at that, and possibly single reviewer verification. So maybe you wouldn't have 2 or 3 people like looking at it and then having those debates. You use them when policy decisions cannot wait. You just want to get a taste of the literature. You don't want to make a policy decision without it. You know, I did a rapid review years ago looking at whether or not medical student electives were worth it. We were thinking about introducing electives at the medical school. We wanted to know, it's a big, you know, it was a big expense. We didn't just want to say, yes, we all like electives, let's put them in. We wanted to have a quick review of the literature so we could have some evidence to give to the dean and say, but look, here's the evidence. This is what you will expect to get from it. Umbrella reviews synthesize systematic reviews on the same topic. We've talked about that. They are essentially a review of reviews. You assess the quality of the reviews themselves. Thank you very much. And you use tools like the I'm not going to go into this. It is in your handout, and you can do some further. We've literally got another 25 minutes, so I'm romping my way through this. Narrative reviews provide expert interpretation without formal systematic methodology. They are flexible and they can synthesize across paradigms, but they are open to selection bias. Greenhalgh and colleagues wrote a provocative piece challenging the hierarchy of systematic reviews over narrative reviews. I think it's in your handout. It's worth reading because sometimes whilst systematic reviews are like the gold standard, they're not necessarily the best approach depending on what you want. This is what I'm trying to explain to you. So just be aware of all these different types of reviews. So how do you choose a review? So here's a simple framework. First of all, what's your question? So start with thinking about what's your research question. Is it about effectiveness? Does this work? That points to a systematic review. Is it about breadth and gaps? What's known about the topic? That's a scoping review. Is it about mechanisms, right? Why and how does it work? That's a realist review. Second, what's your timeline? Under 3 months means you're going to have to do a rapid review, and I suggest you can't do a rapid realist review. That is not going to happen. Okay, that would really mess with my head. I'd be working 24 hours a day for those 3 months. So 6 to 12 months scoping review. How long have we been doing ours, Carmody? Nearly a year. Good me. Oh, but we're at the end. Yeah. Yes, that's good. Well, it's 6 to 12 months. I thought it was less, but no, nearly a year. Yeah, that's right. We were designing it this time last year. Yeah. 12 to 24 months. Well, you can do a systematic or a realist review. Third, do reviews already exist? So if there are multiple systematic reviews on your topic, consider an umbrella review. If you're unsure whether a systematic review is warranted, do a scoping review first. Okay, so there is a paper by Munn and colleagues in the handout that I'm going to give you on systematic review or scoping review. And there's also a paper by Varpio on the decision-making process. Also, that reference is in the handout you're going to get. Okay, reporting guidelines. I'm going to try and move swiftly on here. So why do reporting guidelines matter? So there are 4 key reasons. They matter for transparency, reproducibility, quality, and publication. Transparency ensures readers can understand exactly what you did and why. Reproducibility means others can replicate or update your work, so they can actually take all of your searches. If you did your review 5 years ago, they could do a quick review of the last 5 years, mapping exactly what you've done. They ensure you don't miss critical methodological elements. And publication. Many journals now require that you submit a checklist that's been completed against a different type of review. So the key insight here is that reporting guidelines don't tell you how to do research. They help you be transparent to describe what you did. So they're not methodological straitjackets, they are communication tools. So the Prisma family, how many of you have come across Prisma? Give me a show of hands. Yeah. Okay, that's good. Most widely used set of reporting guidelines for reviews. Prisma 2020 is the updated core guideline, 27 items with expanding explanations, and it replaced the 2009 version. So use this for systematic reviews or of interventions of effectiveness. And then you've got the Prisma P. So they put the little thing on the end for the different ones. Prisma P is for protocols. The Prisma SCR is for the extension for scoping reviews. That was published in 2018, and it's got 20 essential items that you need to make sure you've done in a scoping review. Prisma S focuses specifically on search reporting. So there are numerous specialized extensions for diagnostic test accuracy, for network meta-analyses, for individual participant data, for health equity focus, for complex interventions and harms reporting. But the key message is always look for Prisma, okay? And then the latest extension for what you want. Beyond Prisma, there are other key guidelines that you should know about. RAMASIS is for realist reviews, and meta-analysis reviews is, and NTREC is for qualitative evidence synthesis. SWIM, which is synthesis without meta-analysis, is useful when you're doing a systematic review, but statistical pooling isn't appropriate. And then there's SANRA, which is a scale for assessing a narrative. Okay. So let me highlight 3 essential resources also in your handout that I think we can start handing out now, I think, because we're about to do the hands-on activity. The Equator Network. Equatornetwork.org is the central repository for health research reporting guidelines. It's searchable with over 500 guidelines. You can search by study design, clinical specialty, or report section. The LitXR, so that's LitXR, literx.com, was developed specifically for health professions education. It provides practical guidelines for 8 review types with downloadable one-pagers. And it came from a series of European perspectives on medical education. The JBI manual provides comprehensive methodological guidance for evidence synthesis. It's free online, and it is the gold standard reference with chapters on all major review types. It's also worth knowing the Cochrane Handbook for Intervention Reviews, Prospero for protocol registration, and the Open Science Framework for protocols. Okay, so I am going to give you a hands-on activity, which is in your handout. For those of you online, I can put it into the, if you give me a moment, I can pop it into the chat. That's probably the best way. And this is just kind of like, you know, good educational practice is that you have a go at working out which one you think you should be doing. So in person, in groups of 3 to 4, and let me see what's happening online. How many do we have online? Okay, we may put you into one group online. So hold on for that. So in person, groups of 3 to 4, look at these 4 scenarios and decide which review type is most appropriate when reporting guidelines and when reporting guidelines should be used. So scenario 1 asks about interventions for improving clinical reasoning and whether they work. Note that effectiveness language. Scenario 2 is about what research has been conducted on feedback in Asia. Scenario 3 is a 6-week timeline for decision about simulation. And scenario 4 asks about why IPE works. You have probably only about 5 minutes to discuss in your groups. So I suggest you start now, and I'm going to upload the handout for those online, and then we can pop people into a group. Yeah. Okay, so for those of you who are online, you may want to download, I'll give you a few seconds to download the handout, and then I'll put you into two groups because we've got 11 participants. So let's debrief. Scenario 1. Systematic review. Did you all get that one? Yes? Somebody tell me why you chose systematic review for that one.
It's a very specific question about the effectiveness of it.
Yeah, a really specific question about the effectiveness. And so it was absolutely very clear it was a systematic review. Number 2, scoping review. Why did we go for scoping review? Someone over here? Say that again. You got it wrong. Oh, what did you say? A realist review. Yeah, okay. It's quite easy to get them mixed up. So who got it right? Yes, okay, Carmody. Well, you should get it right because you're doing a scoping review. Why did you choose scoping review?
What has been already done, we want to know the extent of things at the moment.
Yes, it's talking about what's the extent of things, what's already been done. Yeah. Number 3, rapid review. Come on, who got rapid review right? And why did you say rapid review? Yeah, the timeline. The timeline is a really important thing. And then finally, the realist review. Who got that one right? Yes? Anyone down here get that right? Number 4? Why did we say number 4 was the realist review? Come on, somebody shout it out, yes? Yeah, it was asking lots of why questions, wasn't it, about the context and stuff? Yeah, it was the 4-year-old one again. So why do certain things work in certain contexts? That was the giveaway. Okay, so we have got less than 10 minutes to romp through this 10-minute final section, so we're not doing too bad. Okay, so before we wrap up, I'm going to highlight some common pitfalls to avoid. Because ultimately, this is all about doing the right review for the right questions and getting your work published because it's rigorous, okay? So the common pitfalls, calling everything a systematic review. If you're mapping the literature, call it a scoping review. Be honest about your methodology. Don't hide it. Some people think scoping reviews are second class, but they're not. They have a different purpose, okay? So it's a bit like saying, oh, I'm wearing my gym gear, but actually, you know, like the diving gear that I've got is better quality, you know, but going to the gym in your diving gear would be really weird, wouldn't it? Right? So it's about actually doing the right review for the right circumstance. And that's where the quality is. That's the gold standard. The gold standard isn't that hierarchy that systematic reviews are top and everything else is below it. The gold standard is the right review for the right question. So the second mismatch is to begin with a question and a method. A why does it work question needs a realist approach, not just a systematic approach. And third, skipping protocol registration. I'm going to recommend that you register your protocol You write your protocol, you register it with Prospero or the Open Science Framework, and registration strengthens credibility and reduces bias. Fourth is incomplete reporting. So if you use the checklists from the start, not retrofit it into the submission. And the best practice is choose your method before you're searching. Register your protocol early, use the checklist as a planning tool, be transparent about your limitations. It's okay, everything has its limitations. And avoid, consult a librarian, that's another thing. Get your search strategy with someone who really knows about how to search the literature. So the key messages to take away: not all reviews are systematic, and that's okay. Your research question drives your review type. Effectiveness points to systematic, breadth points to scoping, mechanisms point to realist, urgency points to rapid. Third, reporting guidelines ensure transparency and quality. Use them to help you plan, not just a publication. And the resources exist to support you. So that's the Equator Network, the JBI Manual, the LitRx, and librarians are your friends. This is for another talk that I'm not doing here, but I could do here. I looked at 7 major publishers. I looked at Elsevier, Wiley, Taylor and Francis Sage, Open University Press, PLOS, and Frontiers. And I looked at the, what does it say that research is allowed to do with, what can you do, what can you use AI for in research? You can use it for language editing and grammar checking, generally. Idea generation, so that's when you can ask it, but you always need to check. And brainstorming, literature search support, coding assistance, and improving the readability of your drafts. But all AI uses require human oversight and disclosure, and you remain accountable. AI hallucinates, so just don't take any risks, because you will damage your reputation and the reputation of your university. Here's what you cannot do, and we literally have gone over, so I'm really sorry about that, but I think it's quite useful. Listing AI as an author or co-author, using it to generate or fabricate data, uploading participant data to public AI tools, creating or manipulating images and figures, replacing your analysis with AI output, and any undisclosed use of AI. So AI essentially assists your thinking, it cannot replace it. The meaning making must remain yours. Great question. Sorry that I've overshot by a couple of minutes. Thank you so much for being here. Nice to see everyone. And hopefully you've learned something in this hour. And yeah, thank you so much.
Maybe also I need to show and those who thought that they need a systematic review but understood that maybe that is not what you have been doing. And for those who think that their view changed at least, so that you take on something.